Today's guest has been featured in Forbes, NASDAQ, and Entrepreneur. He is the host of the mega popular Build Your Network podcast, hosting everyone from Grant Cardone, Pat Flynn, Dean Graziosi. He is the creator of Podfuel and the 30-day podcast launch, which you can learn all about launching your first podcast at 30daypodcastlaunch.com. His mission is to help 1 million people cultivate genuine relationships the right way. Travis Chappell, welcome to the show.
Mark, thanks for having me, man. Glad
It
to be
is.
here.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to have you here, Travis. Love what you're doing for people both in the community and for everyone that's listening in and wants to build their podcast. So let me start here. Networking. Everyone knows they need a network. Everyone knows they need to build their relationships with other awesome people. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, all that. What's the biggest networking mistake that people are making?
That's a good question, man. I would say probably the biggest one that most people make is it's still all about them, and it's very me centric. And that's just the opposite of the way that you should go about building your network. And it seems counterintuitive because when you first get into the space, into any sort of business or whatever, and people say, "Oh, you need to go network, you need to go network," it's always from a place of you need to network because it's good for you, which is true. But if you go about networking because it's good for you, then you're only going to run into people who are networking because it's good for them. And then you have a bunch of takers in the room trying to take the whole time, which is how you end up with these like happy hour cocktail parties with, the name tags and people just choking down drinks trying to get through their sales pitch to the 12th person of the night and then wondering why it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably one of the biggest things, man, is people are too focused on themselves and what they can get out of a situation rather than focusing on the other person and what they can give to the situation.
I absolutely love that. Focus more on giving and providing value to the other party, because I got to be honest, when I'm on platforms like LinkedIn or Facebook, I'm getting friend requests all the time. And the first thing someone does when I accept their friend request and say, "Hey, it's nice to meet you, glad to connect," it's a wall of text with a link to their website or their course or something. Like, does that happen to you too? Does that drive you nuts?
Yeah, it happens to me all the time. Yeah, for sure, and on every platform. Yeah, it's definitely widespread, especially on LinkedIn, just because there's so many automation softwares out there. Which, by the way, like I'm not even like opposed to that as a whole in general, just to be honest. But I think that there are some places where it's totally not an acceptable way to go about meeting people, and I think definitely in person is the rule for that in my opinion. Like if you're gonna use a LinkedIn automation messaging software to try to get leads for your business, then at that point you're just playing like a numbers game instead of a people game, which is a game to play, maybe not one that you want to win, but it's definitely like an option, you know what I mean? But in person, the problem is when people treat LinkedIn cold messaging and automated LinkedIn automated cold messaging. The problem is when they take that and then they apply it to an event that they go to or a room that they're working or or the next cocktail party or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a big difference between like using some cold messaging automation software and like you being that person who
Yeah.
is cold messaging automation like at an event and just throwing business cards at every person that comes across your path. So but yeah, it's if you can focus on the other person, that's the key there.
That's definitely a common problem. Like you mentioned, you go into a convention or a networking event, and I'm hoping that things are going to start opening up. It's been a kind of a wild ride in here in 2020, but let's kind of lean into that, because eventually things are going to open up. We're going to be back in the hall, meeting people face to face, maybe rubbing elbows, or I don't know exactly what we're going to be doing. Probably doing air high fives, right? But how can we stand out in that crowd when I'm meeting someone face to face for the first time and I want to make an impression? How can I stand out in that person's mind, Travis?
I think first of all, letting go of the fact that you're probably not going to stand out in everybody's mind. Because I could give you some tips and tricks, and there's a lot of people who use tips and tricks like that. I have a friend, Jesse Cole, who walks around events all the time in a yellow tuxedo, and he like everybody knows him because he's the yellow tux guy, and he wears yellow tuxes all the time. He owns a minor league baseball team called the Savannah Bananas, and so he's always decked out in the yellow tux and walking around and like everybody knows who he is. Like, you know what I mean? So you can do stuff like that and you can definitely stick out in everybody's mind. But if that's not your style, if that's not your flavor, then, sometimes you just have to understand that maybe you're not going to stick out in every single person's mind. And the purpose of networking is not just to go meet people. The purpose is I'm almost just to go find more people that are kind of like you. Because if you can find people that are kind of like you, then you're probably going to be able to do more business with those people in the future anyway, rather than trying to force a relationship with somebody that you don't necessarily resonate with, or I hate using this word, but vibe with. You know what I mean? Like if you don't vibe with that person, then you're probably not going to do business with them in the future anyway. Like you're probably not going to be great referral partners for each other. You're probably, you know what I mean? So I think that it's a lot less like trying to worry about if you're impressing people, and a lot more of just like focusing on that other person and trying to um, be genuinely curious about them, which in turn is probably going to make you stand out, because probably everybody else is probably pitching themselves and trying to make themselves sound awesome because they're so worried about standing out and being different, that they just like they become the meme monster at the party and talk about all the things that they've done and the cool accomplishments that they've made in hopes that they're standing out, and they are standing out, but not in the way that they want to be remembered for. So a lot of times, if you just like that person that comes in and has a genuine curiosity about other people, you're probably going to be the one that stand out more anyway, even when it seems like you're not really trying. Because the bottom line is, bro, people will never remember what you say, but they will always remember how you make them feel.
Mm.
And so if you make something about that person and you make the conversation about them and you allow them to talk a bunch and you ask good, insightful, thoughtful, curious questions that engage in that conversation with that person, then you're probably going to be one of the people that sticks out to them the most of that night, because they're going to feel natural, they're going to feel comfortable around you. And if you can accomplish that, you're probably going to be that differentiating factor that you're going for anyway.
Yeah, I really like that. People will remember the way that you made them feel, because I feel like when you're meeting people in an event or you're meeting people online, whenever you're meeting people, you want them to be informed about what you do. You want them to be
Mhm.
informed about the value that you can provide for them. But one of the things that I struggle with is exactly what you said. You want to make it more about them, right? So how do you also create awareness? So how do you create awareness for yourself, your project, and what you're doing, while also focusing entirely on the other person? What are some strategies and ways that we can kind of flip the script a little bit?
Yeah, to me, it's all about asking good questions, which is a skill set, by the way, that podcasting helps you get better at, and you're doing a really good job so far, Mark. Like the questions that you're asking, you clearly been doing this for a while, and that's something that you can take into those types of interpersonal relationships. And I think that's the name of the game, man. Is just trying to make that person feel good about themselves and what they do. You At the beginning of the conversation, you probably have already said something about what you do. Like, I don't think that you need to force that on somebody. Like, they're probably going to figure it out at some point during the conversation. You know what I mean? Like that's usually how you start talking to somebody. Oh, what do you do? Oh, what do you do? And then you both tell each other what each other do, and then from there, it's just kind of like becomes like a pissing contest instead of like a conversation between two adults that are just trying to get to know each other. You know what I mean? So I think that it's a lot less about like all of the tips and tactics, and a lot more about just genuinely trying to have interest in another human being.
Yeah, it's one of the things that drives me nuts when you're having a conversation with someone, and as soon as they ask you that question to show that genuine interest, you see their eyes gloss over, and they're not really
Yep.
listening.
And they start like looking over your shoulder to somebody else, and they're
Right.
just kind of like nodding their head and they're totally not engaged. Like, that doesn't make you feel good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that, like I said, people remember how you make them feel, not the way that not the things that you say. And so, when somebody's doing that to you, it makes you feel insignificant. It makes you feel unimportant. It makes you feel like you're not, supposed to be there. There's a lot of things that it makes you feel, and none of which are good. So don't do that to other people if you don't want it to be done to you.
100%. 100%. You hit on a really good point at at the importance of podcasting, and podcasting giving you the tools to be able to ask better questions. One of the things that I did at the last conference I was at is I brought a little remote, very lightweight remote video podcast recording kit. And
Mm.
so what I would do is I'd walk up to people and say, "Hey, what do you do? Great. I'd love to ask. You have 5 minutes? Let me ask you some questions so I can highlight you on YouTube and on social and on my podcast." So on one hand, I was able to give them that genuine attention, build that relationship by listening to them, also provide them value, but at the same time, they know exactly what it is that I'm doing. right?
Yeah, right.
I'm in. So I think that podcast has been extremely powerful in growing my network and my brand and my groups. And obviously, it has been for you as well because you're rubbing shoulders, Travis, with people like Grant Cardone, Pat Flynn, Dean Graziosi on your podcast, Build Your Network podcast, right? So there's a question in here. My question is, did you expect the Build Your Network podcast to become what it is today when you first started it? Episode 1, what did you envision your podcast to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't want it to not be good. You know what I mean? So I feel like I feel like I did envision a lot of the things that have already happened, but I was kind of skeptical of my own vision. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh man, one day I'm gonna get this person on. I'm gonna get this person on, and I truly believed it. But was still kind of like maybe, like hopefully, cross my fingers.
So when did it feel real? When was that moment you're like, I'm on to something here? Because that's one of the things that I think is really challenging for entrepreneurs who are building different projects. You get pulled in all these different directions all the time. What was the moment where you're like, okay, this is it. I'm in the right direction. I'm going to stay in this lane.
That didn't really come until like probably 15, 16 months in. And it wasn't really like one thing that happened. It just was like I just noticed engagement starting to happen across all my platforms. Which is when I was like, oh, okay, so people are actually paying attention to what I'm like putting out there. People are paying attention to what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Because you would think it would be like, oh, well, this one interview or this one share or whatever. But like I interviewed Grant like 9 months in on my podcast, and he shared like 4 clips of our interview on his Instagram. And I thought like that, man, I'm done. I made it. You know what I mean? And like that, it always brings those one-offs always bring spikes in listens, but they don't make or break you.
Yeah.
And so if you're searching for that thing that's going to make or break you, you're most likely going to be disappointed unless it's like The Rock or freaking Kylie Jenner or somebody like that. You know what I mean? Like it's just not enough. It's not enough to nobody's going to put you on. Like you need to take responsibility for yourself and for your business and for your show, and go out and make it happen. And so that's kind of how it was for me, man. It was just kind of like I want all these people on my show, and I want to have a good show one day. But in practice, it's a little bit different. But I just kind of committed to it from right there, where it was just kind of like, well, even if nobody's listening, even if nobody's paying attention, even if it's nothing but crickets after 6 months or 8 months or a year, like I'm gonna keep doing this thing until I see some results from it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You brought up a lot of really good points there, Travis. One of which is don't get too high or too low because that's a dangerous roller coaster. Just kind of float the middle, stay in your lane. But I want to talk a little bit about how that applies to someone who's just starting their podcast, right? So you're obviously teaching people how to do that, how to launch their own podcast from the 30-day podcastlaunch.com. So, what is a good goal for someone to have when they're first launching their podcast? Should it be to make $1 million? Should it be to have The Rock on their show? What's a good goal? What's a good target to set?
Yeah, sure. I mean, have all those lofty goals for yourself. I have all those goals for my show, and I did when I started. I think that those are the fun things, and I think that if you're, I think that people don't spend enough time dreaming sometimes. You know what I mean, and putting yourself in the situation, like in your head, of actually achieving some of the things that you've set out for yourself for such a long time. Yeah, I think that's a largely uh, contributed to my ability to like actualize my goals is the amount of time that I spend dreaming about reaching those goals and actually feeling what it's like to have reached that when I haven't reached it yet.
But don't you
Um,
think that it can be kind of deflating as well? If you're 6 months into your podcast, you're only getting a few dozen listens on your show, and you're like, "This isn't working. I'm wasting my time." That's kind of the concern I have a lot of times for people that are new in the
sure.
industry.
Sure. I mean, there's multiple goals that you have. You know what I mean? Like just because you have a goal that's more attainable right now doesn't mean you don't have a longer term goal that's not as attainable right now. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like they're not mutually exclusive. You can have both of those things. You can have these are my 6 month goals. These are my 12-month goals. These are my 10-year goals. You know what I mean? And the 6 month goals are just never going to be the goals that you're super excited about. It's just not like you can't accomplish enough in 6 months. Like 6 months is just such a short period of time. Like there has to be a large amount of luck involved in order to be able to reach those like really high goals that you have for yourself in 6 months. So that's why I always think having those 10-year goals in front of you, even if they're not even like super, even if they're kind of abstract, even if you're not sure how exactly they're going to look, like still spend time thinking about them and pushing toward them, because that's what's going to fire you up and motivate you to hit those 6 month goals. I'll spend some time thinking about where I want to be in 5 years, and that's what motivates me to get off my ass and like go do something right now that I need to be doing right now. Because if I don't do the work right now, then I'm definitely not going to end up anywhere near where my 5 year goal is. And I just like thought about that for like the last half hour and how awesome that's going to be and what I'm going to do with X, Y, and Z. And like I know that it gives me such clarity that's what I want.
Mm.
If you don't visit your goals often enough, then you might not know that that's what you want anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like if you don't visit your goals often enough, then you might just end up reaching a goal that you realize that you just didn't even really want to reach. And you never took the time to get clear on where you wanted to be, like, so even stuff like, what kind of a house do I want to live in? What kind of a car do I want to drive? Like, and really be honest with yourself. Don't sell yourself short because of what you think might or might not be realistic. Just like say, if it were possible, what would I want my life to look like in 5 years and 10 years? And then reverse engineer it and say how much work, what is it going to take in order for me to get to that goal in 5 years or 10 years from now? And am I willing to do the work to get there? That's all achievement is. And some goals, maybe you're not willing to do the work. Like that's why I've never told anybody that I wanted to be a billionaire, because I personally don't think that I do want to be a billionaire. Like I think that that's I don't view myself ever putting in the amount of work necessary that it takes to become a billionaire personally.
Mm.
And that's not a game that I'm like trying to play at the moment. You know what I mean? Could that change? Sure. But what I'm saying is like I've done the math. Like I've looked into the future, been like, what would it take in order to become a billionaire? And then I reverse engineered the work that it would take to get there. And I'm like, not really for me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I
the
would rather,
sacrifices. You're on a
yeah,
Learjet, but you
sure.
have no family. Your kids hate you. It's
Sure. Yeah, like there definitely could be those things if you obviously don't take the time to spend time with your family or whatever. But yeah, for me it's just like, you know what, I would rather make a good amount of money, a certain amount of money, and that allows me still to be able to have freedom of lifestyle, of freedom of with my time, be able to fly my friends out somewhere and hang out for a couple weeks, like do the things that I want to do, drive what I want to drive, live where I want to live, but not necessarily like I don't know if I want to put in the work to go all the way. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I feel like not enough people do the work around trying to figure out like what does that mean though? Like I have this abstract weird goal that's up here in the future, but like how do I get there? What are the actual steps that I need to take? And sometimes if you reverse engineer those steps, you might realize that like, you know what, I don't really want that bad.
Mm.
Like I don't want that goal that bad. But if you do want that goal that bad, now you have the roadmap that's going to get you there, and you don't have anyone else to blame but yourself at that point, because you're the one that decided not to put in the work, and that's why you didn't reach your goal. You know what I mean? So all that to say that I agree with you. I think that you should have the 3 month goals and the 1 month goals and the 6 month goals, the 1 day goals, like all of those things are important to have. Like, what am I going to accomplish today that's going to get me to the point where I want to be tomorrow? And then ask yourself that question every day. But that does not mean that you shouldn't have those 5 and 10 year goals. Those are I think those are the ones that are fun to think about. Those are the ones that get you out of bed in the morning. Those are the ones that make you like do what you do and be the crazy person that's starting your own business or doing your own thing or investing money into this or that, because you're just like, you know what, that's the goal. That's where I want to be for sure. That's definitely where I want to end up. So I'm not going to be able to end up there if I don't take this giant risk, or if I don't buy this mastermind membership, or if I don't, spend this money in ads or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have clarity on where you want to end up, then a lot of those decisions can seem impossible to make right now.
Yeah, I mean, super smart stuff. Reverse engineer it. If you're not clear on where you want to be in 5 and 10 years, you're never going to get there. If you can't see it, if you can't see what your perfect life looks like, you're never going to get there. But I think it's also important, like you said, that you have to be flexible, because one of the things that you're going to find throughout your journey is, I always love this. I love this when you're speaking to a coach or an inspirational speaker, and they say something like, "You got to know your audience. You got to know your audience, and once you know your audience, then you're gonna blow up." And I don't disagree with that. But one of the things that I found is it's hard to really know who your perfect avatar is, who your demographic is exactly until you start getting in there, until you start getting the feedback. One of the things that I found on TikTok, I run a fairly large fatherhood brand, was I was making all this content dedicated to fathers, but then I just started getting followed by a bunch of 10-year-olds. And I was like, what's going
Yeah.
on?
Not sure all the fathers are on TikTok at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're there, but you gotta target in a different way, so anyway, you gotta be flexible. You gotta see what's working and what's not working because it doesn't always work out like you think.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Great. So let's take a step back, right? We agree that networking is important. We agree that podcasting is a great way to build up your network, right? Once we've got our podcast going, what's something to do? Give us 3 tips that we can do to separate ourselves from being just a mediocre to below average podcast. What's 3 things we can do to take a step up?
Yeah, number one is your content. Content is king. So you have to create better and better content. The one thing I had one quote on my whiteboard when I started my show, and it was a Steve Martin quote that said, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And a lot of times, your best form of marketing is your content. If your content's that good, like if it is that good, then people are going to find it. Most people are never going to get to the point where their content is that good. Okay,
Right.
to be clear, but but the principle still remains the same. Like if your content is good, more people are going to listen to it, more people are going to share it. Like I always tell people, like, don't spend any money marketing your show if your content isn't good yet. You know what I mean? Like you have to focus on your content first. You got to make your show sticky so that when you do buy traffic, people actually stick around because what you're doing is actually really good. So focus on your content first of all. The best way that I know how to create quality content is to get high quality guests to say yes to an interview, which was always my MO. And it worked out really well for me. I was just always my goal. Like I'm just going to continue to get better and better people on my show and not really worry about my solo shows or any of that kind of stuff or me being the person or the man behind it or whatever. It was just like, I just want to have conversations with really interesting people who've done amazing things. And so that was kind of my goal from the beginning was just making it like that. So content would be one of the big things. Professionalism and credibility would be another thing. Like you want the least amount of drop off between your show and like a radio show that comes on the radio right after somebody listens to your podcast episode. Like the awesome thing about podcasting is it's a super low barrier to entry, but kind of the crappy thing about podcasting is that it's a super low
Right.
barrier to entry. You know what I mean? So like anybody can do it, and that means anybody can do it. So the bad news is that there's a ton of bad podcasts out there. The good news is it gives you an opportunity as a good podcaster to stick out from everybody else because you're actually good at what you do. So it's your content, sure, but maybe it's hiring that voiceover that you were thinking about because the voiceover makes you sound more professional. Getting a production company to edit and produce your shows for you to make sure that your audio levels sound really good and that your intro and outro music is mixed perfectly into the beginning transition of your show or whatever. You know what I mean? It's all about making your show professional and quality. Like even my booking process to book high quality guests and get them onto my show and make sure they have the information that they need in order to be able to jump onto the show. Like all that kind of stuff is all part of that professionalism, equation.
Yeah, and
Um,
both I want to also just interject on both those items, improve the quality of your content, and increase the professionalism. That's a journey, right? It's every episode just getting a little bit better, a little bit better. I think.
mhm.
So great. What's number
Yeah.
3? What's your third takeaway here?
Um, yeah, it's a good one. A good question, man. I feel that it comes down to um being able to make money off of your show. And I know that that's not like a answer to that question that you probably get very often, but I think that your ability to make your show awesome is directly correlated to the amount of money that you're making on your show. Because the more money that you're making on your show, the more money you can spend on your show to make it more awesome, which means that you can get better guests. It means that you can get voiceover work, you can get the production company to do all this stuff for you. You can get a redesign on your artwork. You can spend some money in marketing to get more listeners and to increase your ratings and your reviews and to increase your social presence and to increase your personal brand presence. Like all of that stuff plays into it. And then that's why I always, push people to try to make money on their show rather than just be okay with not making money on it.
Yeah, you definitely need to find ways to make money on your show. And you can learn more about how to do that at the 30daypodcastlaunch.com, where he's going to walk you through how to monetize your show because if you're not making any money, then you're not able to improve the quality like you. I like that one actually quite a bit, quite a bit. You like to think I like to think of money as a symptom of good work, but it can also contribute to the good work. Hiring the right sound engineers, the staff, the blog, the website, getting it all nice and clean. That's a big part of it. Cool. So, Travis, quick rapid fire question. Couple quick rapid fire questions here for you before I let you go. What is a must-have business item that costs less than $25?
A must-have business item, you said?
Yeah, must-have business item.
Um, I mean, it's not necessarily a must-have, but one of my favorite low ticket purchases has been this phone case. Just because I like to have my wallet in my phone so I can
Ah,
travel a lot easier. So, um, yeah, I hate carrying my wallet with me, especially with traveling. I like to travel super light and bring everything in like a backpack, and so I'm pretty minimal when I travel. And that was one of my best purchases that I've made is having a case that actually has my cards in it, but it's not too bulky to where like you know makes irritates me because it's too big in my pocket. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Stuff like that. So that would be one. The other one I would say would be my charger that I plug into the wall is also a mobile charger. Like when you plug it into the wall, it charges itself as a power bank. And then so I can when I unplug it and take it with me places, I can plug in like my phone when I'm on the plane, but without having to carry a separate like power bank and then a separate like wall charger and have like two or three different items. It's like one item that makes it a lot easier.
Love it. Love it. What's your favorite business related subscription right now? What's the subscription that's really rocking your world?
ClickUp has been really huge for our production company. We produce a lot of podcasts and stuff like that, and so for internal communication and to do lists and assigning tasks and project management and stuff like that, ClickUp has been great.
Love it. And final question here for you, Travis. If you had a billboard message that could reach millions and millions of people, what are you going to put on your billboard?
That's a good question, man. It would definitely it would probably be a lot more generic than anything specific about like podcasting or networking or any of the stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis. It would if I had the opportunity to actually reach that many people, it probably would be something more about adopting other people's perspectives or trying to look at the world through different lenses or something like that. I would probably be the message that I would want people to see, just because there's so much divisiveness in the world today, and I feel like the thing that separates that is that people don't ever take the time to empathize and look at the world through somebody else's perspective. And I think if more people did that, that we'd have a lot less contention and divisiveness.
Love it. Travis said it. I agree with it. Travis Chappell, thank you so much, brother.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate it, man.